What up, y'all? I'm on my way back from the beach. I meant to vlog at the beach, but it slipped my mind. I was too busy reading A Brief History of Time by Stephen King. Man, it's a fascinating book. There's like so many possibilities, man. He talks about how, well, there's a number of debates that happened before our time with people like Aristotle and Ptolemy and Nicholas Copernicus, and Galileo, and the main arguments were, and this is really interesting stuff because back in the day, like the stuff that people were legitimately debating, like we just take it for granted now, but back in the day people were debating whether or not the earth is round or flat, and this is common knowledge also, but I like to elaborate on it. People wanted to know whether the earth was round or flat. People wanted to know if the universe had a beginning and if it will have an end, or if it's just static, just goes on forever and goes back forever. And at this point, science has pretty much come to the conclusion that there is in fact an end and a beginning, or there will be an end and there was a beginning. Stephen Hawking actually saw a brand new Stephen King book that just came out. So I'm just maneuvering, driving as usual. This is why I don't like to do vlogs when I'm driving, because driving is distracting, But Stephen King mentions that he believes the beginning of the universe is 10 to 20 million years ago. And I remember the Cosmos television series with Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about how I think they've estimated now that it's about 14 billion years ago, based on the age of the light from stars that we can see. Like the faintest stars, their light is only just reaching us, so the time it has taken for their light to travel to us is, as far as we know, the age of the universe. But the universe is expanding, at least from our perspective. It's expanding. It's expanding because we can see more and more of it with each day. And the technology is getting better to discover it. So, when Aristotle was alive, he talked about how, first of all, the moon eclipses. The moon is not full every night, which is why we have nights where there's full moons, and we have crescent moons, we have half moons, and basically the reason why the moon is different shapes every night is because the sun is hitting a different angle of the earth, and essentially the moon is always there in full sight to see, technically, but the earth casts a shadow on the moon, making it difficult, sometimes impossible, to see the rest of it if it is eclipsed. And sometimes, on some nights, if you look really closely, half of the moon will be bright and half of it will be very, very dim, but still visible. That just means the shadow isn't as strong as another night, maybe, or a night where you can only see half, and the other half, the dim part, isn't visible. And then he also talks, and Aristotle also discovered, or not discovered, but came to the conclusion that the Earth is round because the North Star, which is above the North Pole, when you're standing in the North Pole, the North Star is right above you. But if you're at the equator, it's at the horizon. And that's because, if you go past the equator, you can't see the North Star anymore because you're on the bottom half of the planet. And, that also suggests that it's somewhat rounded. So that was really interesting. And then, but Aristotle did believe that the Earth is the center of the universe. So he was wrong in that belief. Ptolemy also believed that. And Ptolemy has a famous diagram of the Earth at the center. And then I think there were 5 planets known back then. So they were surrounding the Earth as well as the sun and the moons. But then, that got disproven by Galileo, and I think Nicholas Copernicus was the first one to claim that the sun was at the center. And then Galileo, and I think his name's Koper. I'm going to look it up real quick at this red light. I'm not reading and driving. That's very dangerous. But if I'm at a red light, I can get the book out. Check it out. Kepler, not Koper. Kepler, Johannes Kepler. Him and Galileo came out and said that the sun was at the center. And obviously Galileo's super famous. Kepler's less famous, but also relatively famous. And, there's the story of how Galileo was put on house arrest by the Catholic Church because they didn't want to believe that the Earth was not the center, along with Aristotle. I think, at least Stephen Hawking mentions that the reason that Aristotle believed a lot of the things that he believed, things that he couldn't explain, he believed for reasons of divinity, because Aristotle, he still believed in a divine God, even though he was still very scientific and had a very scientific mind. And I can't really blame him because, he lived before Jesus, so, divine religion was still widely accepted and unquestioned among human populations and civilizations. So, just navigating, driving. So yeah, super interesting stuff. I think I'm also reading The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, because I've read The Hobbit like 4 times. It's one of my favorite fiction books ever, and I kind of realized okay, I've kind of exhausted The Hobbit, and also if I want to, expand my knowledge and experience with fiction novels, because I want to be a fiction novelist, or I am a fiction novelist. I just haven't published one yet. I better start reading different books rather than the same book over and over again. And I figure, in a way, I'm kind of wasting time at this point reading The Hobbit. I read it for the first time in 8th grade, and every year or 2 since then, I've just picked it up and really enjoyed it. So, so I figured next up, Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring. I plan on finishing the Lord of the Rings series and then moving on to maybe Game of Thrones or something like that. Although I might want to break from fantasy at that point, and I might want to do some sci-fi maybe, or just maybe some other type of fiction, more realistic fiction maybe. I just love fantasy so much. It's so, because the possibilities are endless and you just never know what to expect, because if you have a romantic drama novel like 50 Shades of Grey, for example, and which I've never read, so I don't have anything critical or judgmental to say about it, but I'm sure that, from what I've heard at least, I don't think there's any magic or fantastical events that happen besides love. I suppose love is a form of magic, but in those type of books, nothing outside the realm of possibility is gonna happen. But in The Hobbit, Gandalf, he's a wizard, dude, and just there's something about fantasy that just excites me so much. So yeah. So maybe I will just go Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, because that's the type of fantasy book I want to write anyways. I want to write a fiction fantasy. I guess the correct term would be speculative fiction, which is just like fiction where anything is possible. So, and I'm going to be going back and forth between Lord of the Rings and more educational / informative books like A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking, because the thing about Lord of the Rings is it's really dense, and fiction isn't something that I like to skip passages in. I like to actually read straight through the whole novel, whereas something like A Brief History of Time, though I probably won't skip any passages in this book necessarily, it's something I'm more skimming. I'm not reading it word for word necessarily. I'm reading it to learn, essentially. I'm extracting the knowledge out of the text rather than, enjoying the way a story is told. And for me, personally, it's really hard to, just for hours on end, read a fiction novel. I like to have some variety where I'm reading like an hour of fiction and I read an hour of science, nonfiction, like Stephen Hawking, for example. So, that's what I plan on doing on my reading schedule. I'm not sure what's coming after A Brief History of Time. I just picked up a Quran from Barnes & Noble's because I found an old Barnes & Noble's gift card in my my wallet, probably from like 2 years ago, and I figured might as well get a Quran since I'm going to be living in Istanbul soon. I think it'd be smart to learn about Islam and just understand its culture, since I'm going to be completely immersed in it for a year. So yeah, that's that. So reading A Brief History of Time, I just explained to you some of the concepts in the first chapter of the book. I just started it today, so I'm in the first chapter. And and the other thing I wanted to just briefly talk about in this video, because it's getting pretty long, is letting other people have control over you. And I know I touched on this in another video about that video was more about not doing things because of other people, not doing things that you want to do because of other people, and doing things that you don't want to do because of other people. Basically just submitting to the wants and needs and preferences of other people at your own expense. It's okay to be selfless, at least every now and then. And it's also okay to make selflessness a lifestyle, but you have to make sure that that's what you want, fully and truly, in order for you to be happy, because your happiness is essential. Because if you're not happy doing what you're doing, then how can you possibly be spreading happiness and positivity if you are not those things, Which is why I always go back to the saying, love yourself, and that's you're the most important person for you to love. You have to start by loving yourself and treating yourself with compassion and empathy before you can truly treat others with the same. Just like in order to teach people soccer, you have to know how to play soccer, for yourself. Like, you yourself need to be able to be on the field. And, to an extent, I suppose. Like, you don't have to be as good as the athletes. For example, Bill Belichick comes to mind. I don't think Bill Belichick is better at being a quarterback than Tom Brady. But without Bill Belichick, Tom Brady wouldn't be the quarterback he is. Because Belichick, he understands the sport, and not for anyone else, but he understands it for himself. Like, he has his own understanding of the game. that only he has, really, and only he can explain fully and understand fully. And in order for him to impart that onto another person, onto another mind, he needs to, know it for himself. So same goes for love. In order to love others, you must love yourself. Same with know thyself. I think know thyself and love thyself, I think they kind of go hand in hand. In order to truly know another person, and I actually believe that I don't think it's impossible to truly and fully know and understand another person. I actually think it's impossible to truly and fully understand yourself even. But I think you can only understand others to the extent that you understand yourself. Just like you can only teach soccer to the extent that you understand soccer, So I think you got to focus on yourself and letting other people have power over you. That's power at your expense. It's self-deprecating, and I think there's a difference. Like, for example, when a mother has power over her son, it is not at the son's expense. In fact, it is for the son's expense, because the mother, in the ideal circumstance, has the child's best interest in mind. So by having power over the child, she's helping it to grow, helping it to evolve into its own being, where it can be independent in the wild. But when you let another person, like a stranger, have power over your beliefs or your actions for really no other reason, just other than the fact that they exist, and they're just like another force that's working against you. That's the other thing. Like when you live under the assumption that you can't do what you want to do because of other people, it starts to build up resentment, often unknown, often unrealized resentment inside of you, because you're basically subconsciously blaming other people for not allowing you to reach your full potential. Let me give you an example. If, when I'm in the car, and I've experienced this for myself, this is a personal example. When I'm in the car, driving by myself, I like to sing, I like to sing to myself. I like to sing along to music. I just like singing. It's an activity that I love doing. I find a lot of enjoyment in it. And on top of that, it's something that I want to get better at. It's something that I want to do professionally. It's something that I see myself pursuing, creating songs. I'm a music producer professionally, but I have the last 2 years or so, I've been slowly developing a love for singing. So when I'm in the car, there's not a lot of things you can do while you're driving, because it's not safe to do anything besides drive for the most part when you're driving. Besides talking or singing, for example. So when I'm in the car, I like to sing. I think it's a good time to practice singing. And when I've done this, I've often caught myself sometimes feeling insecure if I'm stopped at a stoplight, and there's people in other cars around me, and I'm just belting my heart out. And sometimes people look at me, and sometimes they give me funny looks. They're because they can't hear me, which makes it a little bit more awkward, because to them I'm just somebody in their car, just moving their mouth really dramatically. And yeah, it's a little strange. And at times I've found myself stopping singing at stoplights because I've felt so awkward that other people are watching me sing. But then I had a realization, and the realization was actually there inside me, inside my thoughts the whole time, but I was just ignoring it because of resistance, because of insecurities and fears. But I had the revelation, and the revelation finally became conscious to me that if I want to be a singer professionally, then I need to I need to be comfortable singing in front of people, like on a stage, for example, where people are literally there just to watch you sing. And so if there's some people looking at me while I'm singing in my car, like that's not something I can afford to be insecure about. If I want to be a singer, I have to be okay with singing no matter where I am and who's watching. So by not singing at red lights, I was essentially giving power to the people around me. I was giving them control over me. They didn't even know it, and they didn't even care. It's power that they don't know about or care about, but I know about it and I care about it. And when I do that, I'm planting a little seed in my mind that, man, if all these people could just be gone, if I could just be alone, then I'd be free to sing. But really, in reality, no one's stopping me from singing. It's myself that's stopping me from singing, and my insecurities and my fears, and my fear of awkwardness and strange looks from people. So yeah, this video is super long, over 20 minutes, but those are the two things I want to talk about, and I have work tonight, so gotta get ready for that. So I'll see you tomorrow, and I'm gonna continue to try doing vlogs every day. I have been missing some days, but hopefully I'll get better. Some days I'm just busy, some days I just forget. I don't have a good excuse.